Like I said, who wakes up and says, I want a Volvo or Volvo makes great cars? It's like one of the most random car brands ever created. I mean, I feel like Volvo people who drive Volvos are just, I don't know, they want to be different really bad. And this is not it.
So it's pretty big news that Volvo has decided they are going to get rid of the Volvo S60, and that's not really a surprise to me. You see, the thing about Volvo is that Volvo is a very small brand, and while they are very small, they have some of the most reliable cars. In fact, one of their cars holds the world record, but we're not talking about Volvo as a brand. We're talking about the S60 in particular. The S60 sits right below the S90, which is their flagship sedan alongside their XC90. And Volvo has really been struggling over the last couple of decades to really find their footing, especially after they separated from Ford and got bought out by Chinese company Geely. Now, I will tell y'all this, that the S60 being discontinued is of no surprise to me. And in this video, we're not only going to explore why it's of no surprise, but more importantly, how Volvo is pretty much maybe setting a precedent for the future of luxury sedans as we know it. With that being said, stick around and stay tuned because you are now watching The Breakdown. Okay, so let's get into it. So as a recap of what's happening, the S60 is being discontinued. Volvo announced it as what seems as though a sudden drop of information, which they've alluded to, as Motor One did a coverage on it back in August of 2023. And Volvo kind of confirmed that they got rid of the S60 along with other models in their UK market, as well as some other things that were happening in the US. And when Motor One got a hold of it, it kind of led to some conclusions what would be the fate of the S60. There were some rumors it was going to be electrified because everything's going to be electrified, which I have some thoughts on that later on in the video. But the Volvo S60 has always been kind of the strange bird in terms of the luxury midsize sedan segment, which obviously is slowly dwindling away as we moving more towards our mid-size crossovers and SUVs. We already know that. I did a video about a year ago explaining the history of the S60, and one of the shortcomings of the S60 and why this is no surprise is that they have historically sold lesser than their competitors. You see, the S60 has always been a vehicle of niche and more so alternative to the norms of what many people consider to be top tier. Now, before they got with Geely, they were with Volvo, and that was supposed to be their premier automotive group, which if you didn't watch my video on Lincoln, I also talked about that as well. The Volvo moniker was supposed to be like right in the middle between the luxury and mass market. So we'll call it semi-luxury. In terms of sales, the Volvo S60 over the last year has sold an abysmal 1,400 units as of 2023. And that's only half of what they sold in 2022, which was 5,200 units. In this discontinuation, this is supposed to open up a larger opportunity for Volvo as the South Carolina plant, the Ridgeline, South Carolina plant where this car is made alongside the EX90, is supposed to be the opportunity for Volvo to truly move into electrification. In terms of sales and pinpointing and where this car is supposed to be, it's supposed to be right under the flagship, which is the S90. And as of this discontinuation, the S90 will be the last true standing solid built sedan on Volvo's platforms before moving into any other SUVs and crossovers. I'm going to say that the S60 really should have been bigger than what it was, but of course we don't see Volvo as a top tier. I mean, we really hate it. But I think a lot of people obviously have forgotten about Volvo's legacy and heritage. In fact, the very seatbelt that you put on today was in fact patented by Volvo and released into the public without charge so that other manufacturers could indeed apply that to their own cars, saving millions and millions of lives. Now, granted, that's great for the terms of legendary status, but at the end of the day, nobody cares about that. We only care about sales. And so the S60, by comparison, next to a 3 Series, next to a C-Class, next to a Lexus ES, next to anybody else, the only people that they really compare against is they don't even compare against Acura. Acura does a significantly better job of marketing their semi-luxury vehicles, even though they're considered a luxury tier. Now, by comparison, the US market will be the one that the S60 is being discontinued discontinued, there is still going to be some level of production in China, because apparently China has sold almost 9 times what they sold here in the United States as of 2020, selling almost 11,000 units. It was kind of hard to find some information in China, which we'll leave that up to speculation. But the thing is that being that they have a significantly better proposal in China, it just makes sense that with Geely being the parent company and one of China's largest stakeholders, it kind of makes sense of why it's selling better over there than it is in the US. In terms of design, the S60 has never exactly been one that people really understand is beautiful until they see it in person. It is a Scandinavian hotel with technology on wheels. I kid you not. This car is a bit complicated in that it tends to be supercharged and turbocharged and electrified and hybridized. And being that word gumbo I just gave you explains that they didn't really have a understanding of how to market to the average person. Now, by comparison, the XC60 has sold significantly better, selling in 2022 alone 23,000 units. And as opposed to that, in 2023, they sold 6,000 units. And they sold 6 times the amount of vehicles for the XC60 versus the S60 itself. I will say this, in terms of what this represents for many other luxury automakers, it's a pretty big deal. So we've seen something similar where Ford back in 2018 stopped selling sedans and pretty much eradicated a lot of their sedans to kind of ramp up for SUVs. Now, while that sounded good and it looked great on paper for investors, it was a bit more difficult to digest going in for the future, because with the debacle of the Ford Focus, which I've also talked about, the Ford Focus and the Ford Fiesta were the entry points for younger buyers. I think many of these car makers are forgetting that young people have to buy these cars. I mean, somebody got to do it because I'm old. But as many Gen Zers and we begin to age into the new legacy of Gen Alpha, it's pretty evident that a lot of these luxury makers are forgetting, in a world of TikTok and flexing, that people would like luxury vehicles, but they would like to make them affordable. Now, of course, the average price of a car has been upwards of $45,000 to $46,000, but the S60 is kind of a midpoint staple, because as nobody's buying it, it kind of leaves something to be desired in terms of sedans. Sedans are incredibly important. The reason being is because that leaves options for people who would like not just the standard and norms, but more importantly, who like the fun and driving dynamics of a sedan, because as much as we like to make our SUVs and crossovers drive like cars, it will never drive to the same degree as a sedan, even if you use the same platform. The S60, as they discontinue it, is a big note for Volvo, because basically that is a legendary car in its own right and has always been an alternative for people who couldn't quite afford a BMW, who couldn't quite afford a Lexus, and didn't exactly want something, as we'll say for all intents and purposes, downgraded as much as an Acura, because Acura for some people is seen as not as semi-luxury and not quite what it should be, but that's a whole different spiel. And think about it like this. Imagine if Acura got rid of its TLX and only left the RDX. If Infiniti got rid of their Q50 and only kept the QX lineup and just pretty much made us as consumers buy SUVs. And part of the reason why many of us buy those SUVs is because for the value, the price points of sedans and SUVs just offer a lot more, instead of making the sedans cheaper as a point of entry so that people can move into SUVs. And if you didn't know, there's a whole reason why you drive SUVs today, and it's not by accident. And I think I'm gonna make that video one day. And all I'm gonna say is gas crisis of 1973, loopholes and tailpipe emissions is why you drive SUVs today. Don't quote me, but that's why. Now, it also doesn't help that Geely sold off some shares of Volvo, and since then, Volvo has tanked in the stock market. And so this discontinuation is not surprising, as Geely has refocused its efforts for Volvo to be able to be more competitive and more unison in brand and offer better products, if you will. And I don't see how you're doing that, but to offer better product lineups and globalized initiatives for Volvo. And it would seem as though that Geely kind of believes that Volvo is borderline a lost cause, and that's not the first time we've seen that, but whatever. And so being that Geely has sold off these shares, the discontinuation of the S60 is not surprising, because they needed cash. I believe they got about $350 million after selling those shares for Volvo. Being that that is true, it is evident that Geely is trying to squeeze more effort and energy out of Volvo to make them more competitive, especially as we begin to veer off into this electrification space. Now, here's my last thing. There is way too much uncertainty around this electrification, and being that Volvo has already been in the hybridized space, especially the electric space with Polestar, it is very evident that Volvo is going to have a uphill battle, because even in the electric space, the Polestar 3 had to be just released to get people to really look at Polestar once again, because the Polestar 2, before they revamped it, was uncompetitive. Now, in terms of why the S60 was never competitive, it is pretty much because it is overcomplicated and front wheel drive based. That's pretty much the basis of it. And so because it's front wheel drive based, and even though it has an all wheel drive alternative, because it is a front wheel drive based platform, it never offers the same driving dynamics such as that of the Germans and some of the Japanese. Honda is the only one that really kind of focuses on front wheel drive. Everybody else really focuses there on rear wheel drive. But anyway, so I say all that to say is that in discontinuing this, we are beginning to see the entry points for more luxury models to be attainable by the average consumer less and less. And if this does work out for Volvo, we will begin to see other automakers do the same thing and follow in trend in an effort to cut costs, because while we haven't really said it, it's very evident we're either heading into or we are currently already in a recession. It just not has been stated that. And this could mean something very different going forward in the next couple of years. And I hope that gave you a really good rundown of what this is and what this means. But if you've ever considered a Volvo and you want a strong, solid sedan, your choices are going to be slightly diminished, because once this goes, the S90 is the only one left. With that being said, leave me a comment below and let me know what you think about the S60, if you're surprised whether or not that this is being discontinued, but more importantly, what you think this means for the future of sedans. And with that being said, until the next video, I will see you guys later.